Okay, let's dive in. So, Kesser and Steen were apparently still totally buzzing from that Canada-Denmark hockey game.
Oh yeah, Steen's dad called it historic, didn't he? Must have been quite something.
Exactly. And all that, energy and teamwork on the ice, it actually got them thinking about something completely different. Ants.
Ants. Okay, that's a bit of a leap from hockey, but I can maybe see the connection, that intense, coordinated activity.
That's it. Like an ant colony, right? Which brings us nicely to what we've been looking into, this really fascinating idea of using ants as, like, natural helpers,
Yeah.
little caretakers in organic orchards.
Right, moving from the ice rink to the orchard. And it taps into this exciting area where we're looking at nature's own strategies for improving how we grow things.
Yeah. We got hold of some really interesting info that Kesser and Steen found, including a tip from their professor, Mr. Hendricks. He pointed them towards a Danish researcher. They're calling her Aunt Ida.
Aunt Ida, I like it. And she's actually doing this, using ants in agriculture.
Seems so. Built a whole system around it. So our mission today, really, is to dig into how these tiny creatures might help boost fruit quality, crop yields, in organic farming.
And explore other natural methods too, right? To keep Stan's orchard on track.
Exactly. Because, let's be honest, when you first hear ants in the orchard, your first thought might not be positive. You might even reach for the pesticides.
That's true. It challenges our usual perspective. How do we see ants not just as pests, but maybe as partners? It's something biodynamic farmers have sort of understood for ages, hasn't it?
Yeah, that idea that everything, even the smallest ant, plays a role in the farm's whole ecosystem.
And now the science is starting to really back that up. It's not just observation anymore.
Right. So the core idea here is almost like you're subscribing to an ant service for plant care.
Huh. An ant subscription. I like that.
Apparently, as they just, walk around on the plants, the crops, they're spreading these natural chemical substances.
Substances that actually protect the plants against diseases, like tiny six-legged guardians just doing their thing.
Exactly.
And it's fascinating because these natural compounds act, in a way, similar to pesticides, offering defense. This is what Aunt Ida found in her work with organic orchards over in Jutland.
Right, she's getting good, efficient harvests using her ants.
Which is huge because she's tackling a really big problem, losing organic fruits and vegetables in Denmark to diseases and pests. It's a major challenge.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Maybe the limit isn't just about how much land we have for organic farming.
Precisely. And Ida's work suggests maybe the bottleneck is more about how we think, Embracing these different nature-based approaches. Maybe the solutions are right there, we just haven't looked properly.
And it's kind of cool that her interest in nature started way back, before iPads were everywhere, that basic curiosity.
That often drives the best science, doesn't it? That fundamental curiosity. And it led her to a bachelor project at Aarhus University Ecoscience, which kind of laid the groundwork for all this.
Yeah, building on what people already knew. In a way.
Well, exactly. Like biodynamic apple growers had noticed that forest ants seem to reduce apple scab. That's a common fungus.
Okay, so they had a hunch.
They did. And Ida's research put a number on it. A 61% reduction. That's pretty remarkable.
Wow, 61%. That is significant. And this training system she uses sounds clever, getting the ants to patrol the trees.
Yeah, it leverages their natural territorial behavior. Because they're territorial, they defend their patch. So they basically become bodyguards for the apple trees.
Tiny bodyguards, I love it.
It's a form of biological control that ideally becomes self-sustaining once it's established.
Okay, but Kesser brought up a good point. What about aphids? Don't ants sort of farm aphids? And aphids are bad for apple trees, right?
That's a very sharp question. And yes, it highlights the complexity, doesn't it? It's not always simple. The ant-aphid relationship is symbiotic.
Symbiotic, meaning they both get something out of it.
Exactly. Ants love honeydew, that sticky, sugary stuff aphids excrete after they feed on plant sap.
Ah, okay. So the ants get a sweet treat. What do the aphids get?
Protection. The ants guard them against predators, like ladybugs or wasps. Sometimes they even move the aphids to better feeding spots on the plant.
Wow, okay. Like tiny shepherds moving their flock. So how do the aphids actually hurt the tree then?
Well, they have this very fine, needle-like mouthpart, a stylet. They insert it directly into the phloem.
The phloem, that's the sugar transport system in the plant.
That's the one. And to keep that sugary sap flowing nicely, the aphid injects saliva. This saliva contains enzymes, proteins, basically chemical tools.
Tools to do what?
To suppress the plant's natural defenses. They can stop the plant from sealing the wound or from sending out chemical alarm signals that would attract beneficial insects.
That sounds incredibly sophisticated for such a small insect.
It really is. The saliva basically hacks the plant system for the aphid's benefit. And what's also interesting is that some of these compounds can interfere with the plant producing ROS, reactive oxygen species.
ROS, I've heard of that in humans, oxidative stress.
Sort of, yeah. In plants, think of it as an early warning signal when they're attacked. Aphids can dampen that signal right where they're feeding.
So they silence the alarm locally. Clever.
Very. And remember, aphids are mostly after nitrogen amino acids in that sap, but the sap is way higher in sugar than nitrogen.
So they drink loads of sugary sap to get enough nitrogen.
And then they excrete all that excess sugar as honeydew.
Oh.
Which, of course...
The ants love. Okay, it all connects. So if ants are farming these defense-suppressing aphids, how do we counteract that? Is that where salicylic acid comes in?
Yes, potentially. Salicylic acid is a really important signaling molecule in plant immunity, especially against things like aphids, which feed on living tissue. They're called biotrophs.
Right. So how does it help?
Well, the idea is that if you introduce a little bit externally or maybe encourage the plant to make more itself, you can sort of prime the plant's whole defense network.
Prime it, like get it ready for a fight.
Exactly. It can lead to stronger cell walls, production of antimicrobial compounds. It triggers what's called systemic acquired resistance, or SAR, basically boosting the plant's own readiness.
Giving the plant's immune system a little nudge, but you mentioned balance is key, right? You can't overdo it.
That's crucial. Plant defense pathways are all interconnected. Salicylic acid is important, but there's also, for example, the jasmonate pathway, which is more for dealing with chewing insects like caterpillars.
Okay.
If you push the salicylic acid pathway too hard, you might accidentally suppress the jasmonate pathway, making the tree vulnerable to other pests. It's about finding that sweet spot for overall resilience.
Makes sense. Which brings us to this idea of using plants that naturally have similar compounds, like willow or lavender, mint, nettle.
Precisely. This taps into that concept of priming we mentioned. A mild stress or exposure to these natural compounds can make the plant tougher, better able to handle future attacks, like a little workout.
A plant workout. So using lavender clippings or willow. Willow has salicylic acid precursors, right?
It does. And lavender has those essential oils, the aromatic compounds. They have antimicrobial effects, but they can also act as signal modulators, potentially giving that gentle priming nudge.
So just scattering lavender clippings around or planting it nearby,
Okay.
that could actually do something.
It could offer multiple benefits, yeah. It might deter some pests. It definitely attracts beneficial insects like hoverflies, which eat aphids, by the way.
Oh, interesting.
And the scent itself can influence the microbes in the soil and air. It's all about those volatile chemical signals.
So a pretty border that's also working for the tree's health. I like that.
Exactly. And of course, all this works best if the tree is fundamentally healthy to begin with.
Right. Good nutrition is key. That's where things like bokashi, L-ebi, KNF come in, ensuring the tree isn't stressed.
Absolutely. A well-nourished tree, growing in healthy soil with a thriving microbiome, is just inherently more resilient. It can activate its own defenses much more effectively.
So you combine that strong foundation with maybe some priming from salicylic acid or lavender, and maybe you've got your ant helpers.
And you build a kind of robust protection that, honestly, chemical sprays just can't replicate in the same holistic way.
And it seems to work beyond just apples, right? They saw improvements in blackcurrants and red currants, too.
That's a really important point. It suggests it's not just an apple-specific thing, but a general improvement in the whole orchard ecosystem. Healthier soil, more diverse life, those ant helpers. It benefits multiple plants.
So maybe we need to look more into balancing nutrients, too. Potassium, calcium, magnesium, especially with bokashi and KNF impacting the soil microbes so much.
Definitely worth investigating further. The goal, really, is to help nature find its own balance.
Yeah, get to a point where you don't need to constantly intervene.
Exactly. Just supportive inputs, minor adjustments, letting the ecosystem manage itself in a way. The kind of subtle living control.
It reminds me of what Oma said, think like an ecosystem architect, not just an animal keeper or plant manager.
That's such a great way to put it. It's about setting up the structures, fostering the right relationships, understanding the rhythms, using the signals.
Rather than trying to force things.
Right. Things like fermentation, bokashi, KNF, working with microbial networks, using signaling molecules. It's all about guiding processes, not direct control.
Okay, so speaking of guiding processes, pine shoots. That came up in the KNF context.
Ah, yes, pine shoots. Especially the young green ones. They're packed with interesting stuff. Terpenes, like pine and limon.
Those are the things that give pine its smell.
They are. Plus vitamin C, bitter compounds, enzymes, lots of things with antimicrobial, antifungal, antioxidant properties.
And fermenting them, making FPE, fermented plant extract, helps unlock all that.
Exactly. The fermentation breaks things down, makes those compounds more available for soil microbes and for the plants themselves.
So it's not just folklore, there's real chemistry there. What can a pine shoot extract actually do?
Used in small amounts, it can gently stimulate the plant's own defenses, act as a mild disrupt pest communication signals,
Interesting.
release those aromas that deter some insects, and generally help balance the soil microbes.
It's a subtle boost then? And combining it with nettle and dandelion, like a forest floor mix.
Yeah, that's a neat idea, mimicking that natural forest regeneration. Pine for balance, dandelion for minerals, nettle for nitrogen and micronutrients. You get a really complex mix of signals and nutrients.
So again, it's about the signals, the information, not just feeding.
Precisely. Wild pine is like a living toolbox. The shoots, the resin, the scent, it's all bioactive. Fermenting the shoots just concentrates those signals.
And does this apply to garden herbs too, like thyme, rosemary, sage?
Oh, absolutely. We think of them for cooking, but their essential oils are powerful chemical communicators in the garden. They affect soil microbes, pests, beneficial insects, even nearby plants.
So don't just check the clippings.
Definitely not. Leave them as mulch or add them to your ferments. Fresh, dried, extracts, they all send slightly different messages into the ecosystem. It pays to experiment.
Okay, what about resin? Pine resin especially, that sounds potent.
It really is. It's the tree's first line of defense when wounded.
Yeah.
Seals a cut, fights off microbes, deters insects. It's loaded with antimicrobial, antifungal stuff. It screens defense.
And you can ferment that too. Sounds tricky.
It is. You usually need to dissolve it first, maybe in alcohol or oil. But yeah, you can then ferment it, maybe with lactic acid bacteria. You end up with a very mild, like a forest fermented antibiotic. Needs extreme dilution though.
Forest fermented antibiotic.
Yeah.
Wow. What would you use that for?
Potentially a very diluted spray to clean leaves, maybe help against fungi like Manila. It can help balance soil microbes, reduce insect pressure by messing with their signals, maybe even trigger defenses in nearby plants. But honestly, it's powerful stuff. Tiny amounts are key.
So that experiment idea, dissolving resin in alcohol, adding a drop to a ferment with pine shoots and herbs, that's like creating bottled forest signals.
Kind of. Fermented forest air in a bottle.
Yeah.
Information, not nutrition. Pine is amazing. Resin is like its biological plaster.
And a simple pine tincture, just steeping shoots in alcohol.
Yeah, that extracts the terpenes and other good stuff too. Antifungal, insecticidal properties. And those volatile compounds can act as a danger signal to plants, waking up their defenses.
How would you use that?
A very light mist. Diluted, maybe in the evening, on plants and soil. Again, it's about strengthening the plant's own ability to cope, not just attacking the problem directly.
And pine might even attract good microbes.
Some research suggests that, yeah, beneficial microbes might use those terpenes as cues to colonize the roots. So for something like Manila, a pine tincture might help make the environment less welcoming for the fungus and boost the tree's defenses, especially if you combine it with microbial support, like bokashi tea or mycorrhiza.
It's that synergy again, isn't it? Chemical signals and biological helpers working together like in a forest.
Exactly, finding that natural balance.
Thinking about natural balance makes me think of wild plants like blackberries. They just seem to go wild sometimes, don't they? Does that tell us something?
Oh, absolutely. That vigorous growth you see in blackberries is often a sign of really healthy soil life, good nutrient cycling. They're pioneer plants.
Pioneer plants.
Yeah, they move in quickly, they're great at binding carbon, and they produce loads of bioactive compounds, tannins, flavonoids, all that good stuff.
So their strength is actually information for us, and we can use them.
Definitely. Cut blackberry canes make fantastic mulch, especially for acid-loving plants. You can ferment them into FPE for feeding plants or soil.
Okay.
You can make a cold water extract to stimulate roots and microbes, maybe deter some pests. Even the ash from dried canes is mineral-rich, good for balancing pH in small amounts.
Wow, lots of uses.
The key thing is that vigorous growth itself tells you the system can support high biomass. It's a signal of potential. You can even use blackberry material around other plants as a sort of green boost, transferring some of that energy.
This has been, wow, a really packed deep dive. We went from a hockey game all the way to ants, aphids, salicylic acid, fermented resin.
It really shows how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? The ants, the plants, the microbes, the wild blackberries, it's all part of this incredibly complex, dynamic system.
So I guess the big takeaway for you listening is to really embrace that idea of being an ecosystem architect, whether it's in your garden, your orchard. Think about the whole system.
Right. Understanding and maybe gently guiding these natural signals and balances. Using the ants, trying out some fermented extracts. It can really help improve the health and yield of your plants. Keep things like Stan's orchard humming along.
It's about building that resilience naturally. So here's a final thought to chew on. How can you start observing the signals in your own space more closely?
Yeah, what are the weeds telling you? Which insects are showing up? What do things smell like after rain? It's like learning to have a living conversation with your plants and the land they grow on. What are they trying to tell you?
A living conversation. I love that. And if you enjoyed this exploration into, well, the secret life of orchards and want to keep digging into fascinating topics like this with us,
Then definitely hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss where we head next.